Okay, so tearing down further into our 2005 Nissan Quest to examine this timing chain noise. What we've done is we pulled the motor mount and, let's see what else, coolant overflow, a bunch of stuff that's all sitting right here in the way. There's a fuse relay box, pulled all that out of the way. Got back down in here, and down in there is a cover that's pulled off that you can see, and that is access to the timing chain tensioner, and they give you access to that so that you can remove it if you need to replace the water pump. The water pump is driven by the timing chain, and it's behind that cover right there. Anyway, with the timing chain noise that is common on these, one of the things that causes it is a problem with the guide. So back in here, you can see reflected there in the mirror. The camera will focus. Oh, let's see if we can get that camera to focus in there. The tensioner, you can see there's two bolts there in the mirror. Those bolt the tensioner on, and then that long shiny rod that's sticking out is the plunger for the tensioner. It's sticking way out because the guide has actually slipped. So the plastic piece of the guide has slid down, and that plunger now is pushing on the metal backing of the guide, which is not what it's supposed to do. And so anyway, the chain is making a tremendous amount of noise because of the way that tensioner is riding. So we're going to go ahead and pull the rest of this cover off, and then we'll have a look at the tensioner and the chain, and we'll inspect inside of there and make sure that nothing major is damaged. But at this point, we're certainly going to be replacing all the guides, the tensioners, and the timing chain. So everything that's behind that cover. So we're going to keep going here. We're going to keep tearing this down, and then we'll have a look at what's there once everything's out of the way. So still working on the timing chain problem on this 2005 Nissan Quest. Okay, we've got the cover off of the V6 engine here, and you can see our timing chains behind the cover. Cover is kind of tough to remove in the car. Obviously the engine and the transmission, everything is still in this car. It is possible to remove. There's nothing in particular that's really difficult to do, but it is very time consuming. I would just I guess it's worth mentioning that getting the upper oil pan off was probably the most difficult part, because with the engine mount that is normally right here holding this end of the engine up is removed, so the engine sags a little bit. So you have to figure out a way to lift the engine up so you can snake that oil pan out from underneath. So down here, if we look at our tensioner, right down there, you can see the plunger, and it's pushing on the guide. Now, right here on the timing chain guide, this plastic piece that's sticking out, this is where the tensioner should be riding, that plunger for the tensioner. So the plunger that I'm talking about is here. Okay, well it's not, it's just pushing against the back of the guide. It's not pushing against that because that plastic piece of the guide has slid down a long ways. The other thing that's worth noting here in this engine is a rather thick accumulation of sludge, which is never a good thing. That's what all this black nastiness and buildup is, all just engine sludge. And this comes from the oil. And sometimes it's common if the oil is not changed as often as it should be. Now, I spoke to the owner of this vehicle, and they promise that they never go more than 4,000 miles between oil changes, which should be fine. So why is it sludging up? Well, it's kind of hard to say. There are some engines out there that just have a tendency to sludge up a little bit. It may be a good idea to use synthetic oil in this engine. The problem is, if the synthetic oil breaks down any of this sludge, it can cause it to get down into the oil pan where it could potentially plug up the pickup tube or get into the engine somewhere where it could cause damage in crankshaft bearings and other places like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to try to clean all this sludge out as much as we possibly can to hopefully prevent that kind of a thing from happening. But anyway, that's what this looks like. Once we get that tensioner, or not the tensioner, well, the tensioner and the guide, once we remove those things, we'll take a closer look at them. Okay, so now we've got everything all torn apart. And let's have a look at this this is the tensioner guide, okay, the one that pivots down there at the top, or sorry, at the bottom. Up here at the top, you can see that it is broken. So what's happened here is this whole plastic piece, you can see it moves, it slides, it's like practically falling off. You can see the spot right there, that gash. That's where the tensioner was actually riding, or the tensioner piston was contacting this guide. This plastic piece should be slid all the way up, and then the tensioner should be pushing right there, but it wasn't, because this top piece up here broke off and it caused the plastic to slide out of the metal. So if you look at the new one here, you can see the way that looks right there. Anyway, that's the new one. Now the old tensioner itself, see how far out that piston has pushed itself out. So it was almost like it was barely holding together. And then, of course, compared to the new one, that's still got the little retainer pin and clip in it. But anyway, so we're going to put this whole thing back together with all the new bits, and the noise will be gone, and that ought to fix this one up. But so anyway, it's kind of a big job getting to this guide, but getting it fixed up, and it'll be as good as new.